What would you do if your mother disappeared overnight? No phone call, no note, just gone. Imagine the panic, the disbelief, the unbearable anxiety that sets in as you stare at the empty space where she should be. For Savannah Guthrie, this nightmare became real. The beloved journalist, a household name in America, suddenly found herself confronting a horror story that could have come straight from the headlines she reports on every day. Her mother, Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, a woman with frailties and health concerns, vanished without a trace. And the first sign that something was terribly wrong wasn't an alarm bell, but the appearance of FBI agents at her sister Annie's home in Arizona. Why were they there? What had they discovered? And most importantly, where was Nancy? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story begins on a seemingly ordinary Saturday evening. Nancy had been out for dinner with her daughter Annie. It was a quiet, normal night, a family gathering filled with conversation and laughter, or at least, what seemed like it. Annie drove Nancy back to her house after dinner, a familiar routine. No one imagined it would be the last time Nancy would be seen by her family. But somewhere between that ride home and the following morning, something went horribly wrong. Something so shocking that law enforcement would later describe it as a scene unlike any they had encountered in recent memory. By Sunday morning, the realization hit. Nancy Guthrie was gone. The home that had always been a sanctuary, a place of safety for an elderly woman and her family, was now empty in a way that made the hair stand on end. Savannah, who often faces the world with poise and calm, was suddenly caught in a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. And then, the FBI showed up. But what prompted such a high-level response so early in the investigation? Local police are trained to handle missing persons cases, especially involving elderly individuals. But the decision to involve federal authorities, to bring in agents who operate with a different level of scrutiny, urgency, and secrecy, signals that the case was not ordinary. Something about the scene, or the circumstances surrounding Nancy's disappearance, raised alarms. In the hours that followed, investigators scoured the home. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence emerged from footage captured by local media outlets. A trail of blood, dark and unmistakable, led from the doorway of Nancy's home. It wasn't just a small smear. It was a pattern leading straight to the entrance, the kind of scene that immediately signals struggle, resistance, and danger. Blood on the tiles, a macabre breadcrumb trail that made anyone who saw it shiver, was a grim hint of the violence that might have occurred. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, a veteran with 50 years of experience, appeared on national news and shared what he called a gut feeling about the case. Something they told me about that scene made me believe there is more than just a missing person, he said. His words carried weight, because for decades he had seen almost every kind of crime imaginable. When he speaks of gut instincts, the public listens. And his instinct in this case was simple yet terrifying. Nancy Guthrie had likely been abducted. A frail, elderly woman, unable to walk long distances on her own, taken from her home against her will. The very thought made the stakes immediately higher. The involvement of Savannah and Annie added another layer of intensity to the story. This wasn't just any missing person case. It was the mother of a public figure, someone whose private life is usually shielded from scrutiny. Yet here was a situation where private anguish collided with public curiosity. Cameras were waiting outside Annie's home, neighbors whispered about the FBI's presence, and the nation held its collective breath. What could the agents have found inside? And why did they spend over 2 hours at the property, leaving with nothing said to the press or onlookers? This is where the curiosity gap deepens. We know something shocking occurred, but what exactly? Was it evidence of foul play? Something that pointed directly to a suspect? Or perhaps a clue that shattered all previous assumptions about Nancy's disappearance? Every second that passed without information only increased the tension. Savannah and Annie were left in a limbo that most people can't even imagine, publicly visible, yet privately terrified. And yet, as terrifying as the FBI's involvement is, it's only one part of the puzzle. There are questions about family dynamics, about who last saw Nancy, and about what might have gone unnoticed during her final hours. Saturday night was supposed to be ordinary, but it became the hinge point of a mystery that continues to baffle investigators and grip the nation. In cases like this, the smallest detail can turn into a major breakthrough or a devastating dead end. What happened that night? Did Nancy encounter someone she trusted, or someone who had sinister intentions? Was this a random act or something planned? The blood outside her home suggests struggle. The FBI's presence suggests serious concern. And Savannah's public profile ensures that every movement, every statement, every development is scrutinized to the finest detail. As we begin to piece together the story, it becomes clear that this is not just a story of disappearance. It's a story of fear, of urgency, of a family's desperate search for answers. It's about the invisible threads connecting law enforcement, media scrutiny, and human emotion. It's about the gut instincts of those who have seen it all, and the shocking truths that can lurk in the most ordinary of homes. You might ask yourself, how could someone vanish from a home where their family is present? How can a trail of evidence be so both revealing and cryptic at the same time? And perhaps most importantly, what will it take to find Nancy Guthrie and bring her back safely? These are the questions that will guide this investigation. And as we move forward, each revelation will force us to confront uncomfortable possibilities, contradictions, and twists that nobody saw coming. The night Nancy disappeared, the ordinary became extraordinary, the mundane became terrifying, and a family was thrown into chaos. The FBI's investigation, the blood trail, the sheriff's gut feelings, all these details are just the tip of the iceberg. Behind every piece of evidence lies a story, a motive, or a secret. And as the hours passed, as law enforcement and family alike searched desperately, one thing became certain. The answers would shock anyone who believed this was simply a missing persons case. And yet, even as the world watched, Savannah Guthrie faced the unimaginable. Public persona aside, she was just a daughter trying to find her mother. Every knock at the door, every call, every passing car might have been a clue. And then there was Annie, who had been the last person to see Nancy. Was there something she noticed? Something she couldn't yet say? These questions loomed large, threatening to overwhelm any sense of normalcy or certainty. The clock was ticking. Every minute mattered. The FBI had arrived, sheriffs were investigating, and the trail of evidence suggested urgency, danger, and a race against time. And in the midst of it all, one truth became undeniable. This was no ordinary disappearance. This was a case that would challenge assumptions, test loyalties, and reveal truths that few were prepared to face. So what really happened that night? How did an evening that began with family laughter end in terror and uncertainty? And what did the FBI find that caused them to mobilize so quickly, to question, to search, and to leave in silence? The answers are hidden, layered beneath the visible chaos, waiting to be uncovered. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What really happened that night? What could have turned an ordinary Saturday evening into the start of a nightmare that no family should ever endure? It all begins with the last moments Nancy Guthrie was seen by anyone who loved her. Saturday night, the evening air crisp and quiet in Tucson, Arizona, seemed ordinary at first. But ordinary, in this case, was a mask for something far darker, something that would unravel slowly over the next 48 hours and capture national attention. Nancy had spent the evening with her daughter Annie. They had gone out for dinner at a familiar neighborhood restaurant, a place Nancy liked, a place she could navigate safely despite her age and ailments. Conversations flowed as they always did, laughter mixed with the occasional lament about health, reminiscing about old times, stories of the past. To an outsider, it seemed routine. To a family familiar with each other's rhythms, it was ordinary and comforting. Annie drove Nancy back to her home after dinner. That drive, though it seemed harmless, was the final time anyone would see Nancy before her disappearance. Imagine watching someone you love get out of the car, smile, and wave goodbye, never imagining that wave would be the last one you'd see. The horror of that moment would only become clear hours later. Inside the house, everything appeared normal. Nancy moved slowly, careful with her steps, as she always did. Her routine was precise, predictable. She settled in for the night, likely expecting nothing out of the ordinary. The lights dimmed, the house quieted, and her daughters went about their evening routines. But somewhere, something went terribly wrong. By Sunday morning, the absence of Nancy Guthrie became painfully apparent. She didn't call. She didn't respond to texts. She wasn't in the rooms she normally occupied. For her daughters, the fear was immediate. The mind races in these moments, doesn't it? What could have happened? Did she fall? Did she wander off? Or worse, was someone else involved? Annie, who had been the last person to see her mother, frantically retraced steps, checked rooms, checked the car, even checked the local streets outside, hoping for a glimpse, a sound, a sign. Nothing. Silence. It was a silence that presses down on the chest, that leaves the heart pounding in disbelief and dread. Savannah, miles away, had to process this from a distance initially, the helplessness of being unable to act, to see, to intervene. And yet, the family had no choice but to alert authorities. Police arrived swiftly, beginning the process of investigation that would quickly escalate to a full-blown search. What they found, or didn't find, was puzzling, unnerving, and deeply alarming. Initial searches of the home revealed no signs of forced entry in the traditional sense. Doors were locked, windows intact. Yet, Nancy was gone. It was as if she had simply vanished. But the first signs of violence emerged soon after. News outlets would later report chilling details from outside the home. A blood trail on the tiles leading to the door, dark and unmistakable. Law enforcement sources later described it as evidence that suggested Nancy was taken by force. Not a fall, not an accident, but an abduction. The mere thought raises questions in your mind immediately. Who could do this? How could someone abduct an elderly woman with ailments that limit mobility? And why? Annie was questioned immediately. She explained every step she took that night, every interaction with her mother, every observation. Her account was consistent, measured, and filled with the subtle grief of someone reliving a nightmare. But investigators had to dig deeper. The family's statements are always critical first-hand accounts, but they are rarely the whole story. Memories falter, perceptions are clouded by emotion, and in cases like this, even minor contradictions can hold the key to breakthroughs or dead ends. The timeline became central. From the moment Nancy returned from dinner to the moment she was discovered missing, investigators tried to piece together every detail. Were there noises in the house during the night? Was anyone around who could have witnessed unusual activity? What about neighbors? Could someone have seen a stranger lurking, a car parked unusually, a light left on in the wrong house? This is where the investigation starts to layer in complexity. It wasn't just about retracing Nancy's steps. It was about reconstructing the environment, the context, and the subtle clues that could point to either a tragic accident or a sinister plot. Each small detail, the position of a chair, the state of a hallway light, a misplaced item, could serve as a breadcrumb in a larger narrative that no one fully understood yet. And then there is the human element. Imagine being Savannah or Annie in these moments. A mother is missing. Law enforcement is involved. National attention looms. Cameras, reporters, and whispers from the community begin to swirl. The private horror of not knowing is now public. Each day, the worry grows, feeding on itself. Every unanswered phone call, every unanswered knock at the door, every fleeting shadow outside the window fuels the fear. Investigators had to consider the possibility of foul play immediately, especially given Nancy's vulnerabilities. An 84-year-old woman with limited mobility cannot easily walk far, cannot defend herself, and would be an easy target for someone with intent to harm. That was the sobering reality. And the blood trail outside her door confirmed suspicions that fear alone had started to suggest. This was no ordinary missing person case. Yet, questions persisted. Could someone within her close circle be involved, even indirectly? Could there have been an accident that escalated unexpectedly? Or was this a targeted attack by someone who had been watching, waiting for the right moment? Investigators kept asking these questions, knowing that the smallest insight could open the door to answers, or mislead them entirely. As the timeline narrowed, law enforcement began focusing on that final night. The period between Saturday night and Sunday morning was crucial. Every minute counted. Digital evidence, phone records, local security cameras, and witness accounts were all collected and cross-referenced. Yet the deeper they looked, the more contradictions surfaced. Small inconsistencies that at first glance seemed trivial became vital threads in the web of uncertainty surrounding Nancy's disappearance. And as night fell over Tucson on that first day of the investigation, The scene outside Nancy's home, the empty rooms, the trail of evidence, and the questions swirling in the minds of law enforcement and family alike all pointed to a stark reality. This was only the beginning. There was more to uncover, more to analyze, and, tragically, more suspense to endure. The last time anyone saw Nancy Guthrie might have seemed ordinary in the moment, but in hindsight, it was the hinge upon which a terrifying and complicated investigation would turn. And as investigators continued to piece together that night, every discovery, every contradiction, and every small clue began to point towards something far more unsettling than anyone initially imagined. But what came next would change everything, and the trail of answers would lead investigators down a path no one expected.